Hi, I'm Michael Wilson from Forza Bloodstock, and this is Dr. Dominique Engel. 2 years ago, we founded a business with the sole goal of helping thoroughbred owners be as successful as possible in our sport. During that time, we've selected 54% stakes horses on their behalf. We would love to help you achieve the exact same success in our great sport. If you're interested in our services, go to raceforza.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonderwheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
Hello and welcome. My name is Gary Falter with the Jockey Club, and I'd just like to welcome everyone to today's online panel. Now, this is the 8th panel in our series of online Zoom panels for 2023, and today we're going to talk about the process of claiming horses for your racing stable. But before we get started, I'd like to recognize our sponsors, starting with the presenting sponsors, Bessemer Trust, Stoll Keenan Ogden, and the Green Group. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to today's panel sponsors, the National HBPA, Forza Bloodstock, and High Point Farm and Training Center. And our Q&A sponsor today is West Point Thoroughbreds. And our thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership and helping us make these webinars possible. So thanks very much, sponsors. And we have a lot of ground to cover today, so if you have a question for the panelists, you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button. So if you'd like to submit a question at any time, please do. At about the 15-20 minute mark, if we have some questions, we'll pause and take some of those questions. And at the very end, we'll take as many questions as time permitting. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. So I'm going to start off with thoroughbred owner Michael Wilson. Michael is also the owner of Forza Bloodstock, one of our panel sponsors today. Welcome, Michael.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. We also plan to have owner Danny Caldwell with us, but he had to cancel due to a scheduling conflict with his doctor. So we made a call to thoroughbred owner Michael Anacino, and Michael's been an owner for years, claims a lot of horses, and is also the executive director for the Ohio Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners. So welcome, Mike.
Great to be here, Gary. Thanks very much.
Okay. So, and next we have Andy Swigart from Toba, and Andy's going to talk about the Claiming Crown and what a great program that is. Welcome, Andy.
Welcome. Thanks, Gary.
And last and certainly not least is trainer Gary Contessa. And congratulations, Gary. You just recently won the Grade 1 hopeful at Saratoga with a horse. I think his name is Nutella Fella. Is that right?
What a name. What a name.
What a race
Yeah.
that was. Well
That
done.
was a good race.
Yeah, it was. That was a heck of a ride. Who was the jockey in that race?
On Nutella Fella, Junior Alvarado.
Yeah, wow. What a move he made. This was a fun race to watch.
It looked like Calvin Burrell coming through because he was
He
inside,
did.
outside,
He did.
inside. It was just an amazing ride.
Well, it'd be nice if all of our horses could run in graded stakes, but we all know that, that the claiming races make up the majority of all racing. And whether you own top graded stakes horses, state bred horses, expensive horses, inexpensive horses, at some point, some of your horses can only compete in the claiming ranks. And with so many claiming races available, it just made sense to talk about some of the considerations in owning horses that are going to compete in the claiming ranks. So for those in our audience that may decide to use the claim box to fill their stable, today's panel is going to talk about that process and some of those pros and cons. And we'll spend some time talking. And also, we're going to move, first of all, talking about a great program called the Claiming Crown. So let's get started talking about that. So Andy, you've got Andy here from Toba. He's going to give us some insights about that program. And for the audience, if you have any questions for Andy, please ask them early on while he's talking, and we'll take a pause and answer some of those questions before we get into some of the other topics. So Andy, why don't you help the audience understand what the Claiming Crown is and when the program actually began?
All right. Claiming Crown simply is a day to celebrate our claiming horses and their owners. It began in 1999, August of that year, and it's a series of starter allowance races for horses that have started at various claiming levels.
Okay. So you say it got started in 1999. So that's been what, 24 years?
Yeah, I think although this year will be the 24th running.
Okay. So how many races are there in the Claiming Crown? And can you talk about the purse structure for those races? Is it just one race or are there a series of races?
No, it's a series of races. We have 8 races. And the total purses for the day for those 8 races, total purse is $1 million. And the individual race purses vary from $75,000 to $200,000 for the big race called the Jewel.
Okay. And as far as payouts on those races, is it first through fourth? First through what how far down do the payouts go?
Yeah, it depends on the host track. Whatever their standard purse payout is the payout for the day.
Okay. Well, that leads me right into my next question. So is the Claiming Crown held at the same racetrack each year? And are the dates the same every year?
Well, yes and no. This year it is at Fairgrounds on December 2nd. Last year it was at Churchill, and the year before that it was at Gulfstream, and that in 21 ended a 10-year run at Gulfstream Park. As I mentioned, the Claiming Crown started at Canterbury Park in 99, and 10 of the first 12 runnings were at Canterbury, with 2 interruptions, 1 year at Philadelphia Park, now Parks Racing, and another year at Ellis Park. So some years we will switch from year to year, and other times we'll run for a number of years at the same racetrack.
So this year it's December 2nd at the fairgrounds. Is it always early December or does the dates vary?
The dates can vary depending on the host track and the timing of their meet. The last few years, it's been in the late November, early December timeframe because we've been we were at Gulfstream Park for a number of years, and then Churchill had it in November last year, and now Fairgrounds being a winter racetrack, we'll have it in early December this year.
Okay, so do the races fill for these races? I mean, do you have full 12 horse fields or?
For the most part, I tell you, even last year when it snowed and it was a miserable day and the races come off the grass, we still averaged over 9 horses a race. So yes, some races, the turf races especially, we will have an overflow field and we'll run with 12. The dirt races will minimum, the smallest field we've had is 8, but there's at least 8 in every dirt race, but they too will draw 10 to 12 as well.
Okay. So is it safe to say that the Claiming Crown is championship day for horses in the claiming ranks?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, all right. So Can any claiming horse enter one of the claiming races, or are there certain qualifications to be entered in one of those races?
Well, as I mentioned, they're starter allowance races, and they're a little different from the overnight starter allowance races in that you have to make your horse eligible beyond just running for the condition or being through the conditions of the race, and as you have to pay a eligibility fee, which this year is due by November 18th. It's $200, and it's $200 per race. So if your horse meets the conditions of more than one race and you're undecided at the time of nomination or eligibility requirement, you pay $200 per race. If you want to wait till entry day, it will cost you $1,000 then to get into the race or to enter the race. And the claiming tags run from 8,000 starter 8 up to starter 35.
Okay.
So you've run for a tag below 35, you're eligible.
Okay. So the nomination fee that goes towards the purses. If a horse doesn't get in, is it kind of like a stakes race? If you nominate, that becomes part of the purse, or do you get your money back if you don't get in?
Exactly. It's like a stakes race. So if you nominate, you don't get in, the $200 goes towards the purses.
Okay. So what's interesting about the Claiming Crown, this is a great example of how two industry organizations that represent horsemen, owners and trainers, got together and created a program that not only helps the industry, but gives owners of the hard-knocking claiming horses a showcase day. So talk about the relationship that you have between TOBA and the HBPA and how that relationship has evolved over the years.
We have a good relationship with the National HPPA, as evidenced by our almost 25 years together with the Claiming Crown project. Obviously, in the generalization, we have two different constituencies between the HBPA and TOBA, and yes, we disagree on some issues, but we have a good enough relationship where on those issues we agree to disagree. But where we can find common ground and common issues that we can work on, we absolutely do work together.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the longevity kind of speaks for itself. So why don't we jump into the questions? We do have a few questions coming from the audience, and we'll have those directed to Andy. So here's one: is there a point system for horses to qualify for Claiming Crown Day, or how do preferences work? So how does that work?
There used to be a point system, but longer. Now it's pretty much the preferences are like a stakes race, where we have horses that have won or placed graded or listed races or other state non-listed black type stakes races. So it'll be, stakes winners first, and then stakes place horses, and then total earnings. So it's similar to your preferences for a stakes race.
Okay. Here's a question about how do you select the host racetrack with the HBPA and TOBA? Do you guys get together every year and talk about it, or how do you select the host racetrack? One of the questions.
We do get together and talk and find out if any particular track has expressed interest in holding the event to one of us, and if so, we discuss if it'll fit in, if there are meets at the right time of year where we can maximize simulcasting, and if it just fits into the overall schedule. I think now we found later in the year works better, but it's pretty much whichever racetrack expresses an interest, and if we can make it work, we will certainly. That's who hosts it.
Okay, and last question about the type of races. You mentioned turf races. You have dirt, turf, short, long. Can you kind of give an idea of the variety of the races?
Yeah, we have short and long, both on dirt and turf. depending on the track configuration, we have run the dirt sprints at 6 and 7 furlongs, and 1 turn mile when we've been at Gulfstream. On the turf, we have a 5 or 5.5, depending on the track configuration, as well as the two-turn races on the turf for a mile and a 16th. On the dirt, we have 1.1 miles is the big race, as well as we have 2-turn races for the lower level starter allowance races. So I think we have the broad range to
Okay.
cover all the distances.
Okay, and hey, your partner Eric Hamelbeck just threw in a statement, not a question. He says, Gary, he says these races aren't stakes races. Okay, that's clear.
yes,
They're
yes.
they're claiming races, and the administrative fees do not go to the purses. I'm
Oh,
not sure
okay.
what he means by that.
Mhm.
But I would assume that $200 goes towards goes to the horseman.
Yeah, the fees are collected. Actually, I have to say Eric's been more involved with that end of it than I have, so I'm not fully versed, so I don't want to speak out of turn here. So,
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for the clarification, Eric. And I think that's all the questions we have on the claiming crown. So let's move on. We got a lot of ground to cover. Appreciate it, Andy. That's a great program.
thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So next we have a video. Again, Danny Caldwell couldn't join us because he had an important doctor's appointment. But we're going to show this video anyhow because it goes through the motions and some of the emotions of claiming horses. And then we'll get Mike and Gary Contessa and Michael Wilson involved. So let's go ahead and show that video, the short video of Danny Caldwell.
When you play the claiming game, you have to be ready to claim at any time, any day, because you may lose a couple of horses, like I lost one yesterday. Today I need to pick up a couple more. The claiming game is where you get return on your investment much sooner. It's also risky, so it don't always go the way you want it to go.
Made some money yesterday.
Yes, sir. We needed those. But buying a yearling, you never really know what you're buying. You go pedigree, you can go confirmation, but again, you still don't know if they've got the heart, and you can't do heart transplants in this business. Kind of hate to lose the horse because he runs big.
Severe very determined here, and Severe is going to prevail.
When you make $10,000 on the claim and $20,000 on the purse, that's what keeps me in business.
That's winning.
Now we just got to claim something. Good luck, Floyd. We need that horse to go with the one horse to have any shot.
And they're off.
Got out.
Good start for Bayard.
Get up and get a check. Come on.
Big guy Ian Wire. Bayard was next. Good gap back to Mr. Benz.
I had that horse 2 weeks. We run third. We make a couple of thousand. We maybe lose him for 8. I give $62.50, which it really don't matter. That means I'm making a little money. And all right, I got to go look at this horse. I just got to keep reloading. So almost every claiming race, I've got to go look at horses. I'm going to look at Snuggly Bear. I put in a lot of hours. You can ask my wife, Allison. She can tell you all about the hours that I put in.
It is, what time, Danny? 10:21. This is a normal Friday night for us. We are watching replays and studying horses for possible claims.
And there's a lot of pressure. There's pressure to win. He's running over his head way high. We'll see if he levels out down the line. Well, a coaching career, when you're at a 2A school like I was at Panama, Oklahoma, you coach everything from one sport to the next. I've done that 13 years, enjoyed every minute of it, but just want to do something different. The pay wasn't real great, and I wanted to be in the horse business down the road. I knew I wasn't going to get there by coaching. I learned a lot from Kelvin Sampson when he was at OU coaching basketball. I was in a clinic, and he was the one that told me about opportunity. You only get that opportunity once or twice in life, so you better take it when you get it. And so when my brother came to me about the natural stone business to do something different, I took that opportunity and it worked out for me to start the business and allowed me to get into horse racing. Looking to claim and hopefully up the horse or at least get it back to the same condition. And if I can make the purse money like I did yesterday on Severe, I made $10,000 on the claim, I made $20,000 on the purse money, and I only had the horse 2 weeks. Well, he ought to be fit because we've run him over the track already, so. Come on, Floyd. Get down. Now I've got money to work with to maybe get a couple more horses.
All right, well, that's a great video. It just really kind of shows the passion, for this business, and no matter what level you're racing at, and just how Danny runs this as a business. It's very interesting to watch. So, there may be a shroud of mystery for some owners about how you go about claiming a horse. So let's talk about that process and maybe how to avoid some of the mistakes that can be made in claiming. So Gary Contessa, why don't you start with that? Talk about that process of claiming a horse and just how do you avoid some of the mistakes that are down the path. And then Mike Anacino and Michael Wilson, just feel free to chime in anytime. Gary?
Well, I get to give you the trainer's perspective, and
Okay.
much like Danny did. But right now, we're in a business where there is a ton of technology, and the informational pipeline is much different. I came into this business in 1975. You claimed a horse, it was let the buyer beware. You got a good one, you got a bad one. You had no idea. Now we have information. We have a lot of technology out there for us. So when an owner says to me, Gary, I'd like to claim so-and-so tomorrow in the 7th race. Well, I'm going to pull up that horse and I want to know as much as I can about that horse. So I try not to leave any stone unturned. If he came out of a 2-year-old sale or a yearling sale, I probably have notes on him. I'm going to look at that. Then I'm going to watch replays and make sure that I'm comfortable with the way he moves, and I'm comfortable that he didn't have any major equipment changes that might suggest a problem on the way. And then the veterinary, people don't understand, all the veterinary lists are now transparent. So if I'm claiming that horse at, let's say, Belmont Park, my next move is to go to the state veterinarian. I want to know that horse's veterinary history. Now, they're not going to tell me little things like, oh, he had this surgery or he had that, but I can absolutely go to any jurisdiction in the United States and they will tell me how many times that particular horse has been on the vet's list. And that's huge for me. I don't need a horse that's been on the vet's list 3 times in the last 6 months. I don't want somebody else's headache. I want as little problems as possible. So I'm going to take all the information that is out there for me. And now we also look, as you're looking at a horse's PPs, a lot of these claiming horses have been claimed before. So that opens another avenue of opportunity because most trainers have a network amongst each other. I don't want to see another trainer get burned on a claim. They don't want to see me get burned on a claim. Sometimes they do want to see me get burned on a claim. But generally, I'm going to go, I might call an owner that used to have a horse. Tell me about this horse. Did you have a lot of veterinary problems? Is he okay? Do you think he's worth still going strong? I'll call another trainer. Horses claim from Steve Asmussen, let's say. I'll call Steve. Hey, Steve, what do you think of so-and-so? Do you think he's in for 16 tomorrow at Belmont? Do you think he's worth the money? And trainers are happy for the most part. Most are happy to share information with you because they know that when they need information, I'm going to share information with them. So there is a whole network out there of information, be it sale information, veterinary information, and other trainers and other people in the industry that might have information on a particular horse. Then if all of those things, if we ring the bell on every one of those things, now we're ready to claim the horse the next day. The owner has to have the money in his account, and we will now watch that horse come into the paddock. Some horses I watch stronger than others, like at Saratoga. I have the opportunity to see them go into the assembly area. I'll watch them first, then I'll watch them again as they're coming into the paddock. I'm looking for where I would locate a soft tissue injury or a big knee or a surgical ankle. I'm looking for things that might turn me off on that particular claim. And then once the visual is done, you look at your owner, he's passed all of my protocol, let's drop the slip. But that doesn't mean you're getting a horse. As Danny, as you've seen from Danny, just because you're in on a claim doesn't mean that there's not 8 other trainers in on that claim. And this year in Saratoga, I was in on a claim and I thought I was being pretty smart. I said, you know what? I kind of found this horse hidden under a rock and I think this is going to be a good horse for me. 33-way shake. 33 other trainers in for that same horse.
Okay.
And I did manage to claim one horse off of Brad Cox, and it was a 28-way shake. And I figure, you know what? When you win a 28-way shake, go buy a lottery ticket. It might be your day.
Yeah, you're doing something right that day. Yeah.
So you don't own that horse till they call out your name. And if they call out your name, it's still not over. Most jurisdictions since HISA have a policy now. If a horse comes back at all on the nod, favoring a foot, favoring an ankle, anything goes wrong with that horse during the race, that horse is veterinary scratch. The state veterinarian examines every claim before they change hands to the new owner. And if that horse is not good, that claim is voided. And that's the norm in New York, Maryland, Delaware, all the places where I race. And I'm sure it's now, out in probably all 50 states, all the HISA states now will have that rule. So there's an added layer of protection to the owner who might want to claim a horse. And Danny was right. You buy a yearling, you're training that horse for a year. Then you send him to the track for another 4 or 5 months, and then he makes a start. You're almost 2 years into that horse. You claim a horse, it's instant gratification. You can look forward to that horse possibly coming back in 3 or 4 weeks, and you're on the board and you're making money and you're at the races with your friends and you're enjoying it. So I call it instant gratification, claiming a horse.
Okay, well, that's a great segue into our next question. Let's start with Michael Wilson. So Michael, why would an owner want to fill their stable with claiming horses instead of going like right now? You're at Keeneland, Gary's at Keeneland. There's a big sale going on. You can buy yearlings, you can buy 2-year-olds in training. Why fill your stable or partially fill your stable with claiming horses?
I think a lot of it's a question that I, discuss with every client that we talk to, because we do a lot of bloodstock work for people. So when somebody comes to me with a budget, I'll say, okay, what's your budget? What's your plan? What's your goals? And really it's about helping people meet their goals. So, if I have somebody comes to me and they say, look, I have 400,000, the first question is, okay, the 400,000, is that just to purchase horses, or is that to also run the stable and run the expenses of the operation? And so there will be certain situations where that money is just for buying horses. And there's others where it's, no, I need to be able to run the stable for a couple of years, 1 or 2 years with this finance. And so I'll look at it as, and everybody in this industry has aspirations to compete at the graded stakes level. I mean, if anybody says they don't, they're usually kidding you, but everybody does. So the question then becomes, what other goals do you have? If your budget, not saying that it's impossible, because we have a client who we've claimed horses for, and they've had a second in a grade 3. They won a $500,000 stake the other day. The horse was claimed for $35,000. They've had those types of horses come into their operation. But some people just want the opportunity to have a horse and run a horse and be competitive and enjoy it with friends. And so in those circumstances, Gary and Danny in his video mentioned it perfectly, of it's an easier entry point. The turnaround's not so long as it is with yearlings and 2-year-olds. And you can kind of, as they said, check boxes. One thing when I look at horses and claiming races is I want to make sure I'm claiming competitive horses. I made a mistake once last year on a maiden 50 filly, because I normally don't claim maiden 50s. And I decided not to claim her, and she won a grade 2. I usually go for fillies or colts in the non-winners of 2 condition. I like to look for horses that I feel have a chance to win the starter allowance, potentially the allowance, and maybe move through their conditions because I feel those horses have higher earning capacities in those realms. As I'm sure Gary could touch on, sometimes you claim maiden claimers. If they win a little bit, you usually have to cut their purchase price in half and put them in for 25 next time if you claim them for 50. Obviously, competition advances in each category. So for me, it's all about what are your goals? And some people, look, I get clients say, I want to win at Saratoga. Well, your best bet is to claim a horse prior to Saratoga and have it ready for Saratoga and put that horse in a position in a race where it has the chance to win. I know a lot of people who try and buy 2-year-olds. And as Gary mentioned, I think on our call before we got on here, last thing you want is to walk into Saratoga with a bunch of 2-year-olds because you might not get in a race, things pop up. So it's really what your goal is and what your budget is to then achieve that goal. And so I think claiming, when you're looking at horses and people say, I want a horse for 50,000, can you find yearlings in that range that are talented yearlings? The new maiden auction condition is a great condition that helps people out. And those are horses that are bought for 50 or less that are protected in a maiden special weight type race. But when you're dealing with a budget that's lower than 50, I always feel your best bet is to go claim a horse because you can make money back on that horse quicker than you can with the yearling. It lowers the risk. $50,000 horses, yes, we do see them jump up and win graded stakes races, but that's not the norm. So it's easier with those smaller budgets to find decent horses that can be competitive for people in the claiming ranks.
Okay, great. So Mike Anacino, that video of Danny Caldwell, I'm watching that thinking, Mike's claimed a lot of horses. Could we have substituted Mike in there and Danny spot him? Is that the process you follow as far as, a lot of horses in and out and always watching those race replays to look for the next possible claim? So, talk about that video and your process of claiming horses.
Yeah, so I was trying to go back and do some research. I think I've claimed over 400 horses, but the most expensive horse I ever claimed was in 1983, almost one of the first horses I claimed, and he was 14,500. So when Michael and Gary are talking about minimum $50,000 claims, they're talking big circuit horses with upside that they were probably $400,000 horses at one time sliding down. I'm in a much different world, but comparing to what Danny did there, I spend the same thing he does, like 3 to 4 hours every night with the help of the Daily Racing Form and Equibase, the race lens that they have, watching replays, looking at forms. One of the things we haven't touched on too much is it's certainly not an automatic thing. You claim a horse, you're going to win the next race. A lot of people make a mistake in claiming and not knowing where their next step is. So when I look at a horse, the first thing I say to myself is, no matter what the cost is, how am I going to get out on this horse? What kind of a race do I need to win in order to get my money back as fast as possible? And then you have to look at what's called the condition book, which is what the upcoming races are that are available for horses to run in. You have to know the track you're at because most jurisdictions have what's called jail time. You cannot claim a horse at a track in Ohio, for example, and race him anywhere other than Ohio for 60 days. At other tracks, it's 30 days. Many tracks, it's end of the meet. So there's a lot of, you have to know the rules at your jurisdiction, but for the most part, you're stuck in your jurisdiction for a while. So you can look at that condition book and say, what's available to me? You have to sort of know what races will go, because there's a lot of races in every condition book every day, 16, 20 races. They're only running 8 a day. So even though they may write a race, you have to have a little bit of experience with the help of your trainer to know, yeah, that race is in the book and it'll never go. Or it's a 2-year-old race, so there's just not enough 2-year-olds in the beginning of the year, so it'll go in September, right? So you have to worry about that. So you have to make sure, how do I make my money back? Is there a good spot? And then you have to, even though there's a good spot, is the horse I'm claiming capable of winning that spot? Just because you want to win doesn't mean the horse is capable of winning that race. So I try to find something in the past performances or with the help of my trainers in the local places. In Ohio, it's Jeff Radosevich, in West Virginia, Jay Bernardini, for example, leading trainers. So there's a dialogue back and forth. What can we do to improve it? Do we see something in the horse's running style? Do we something in his past races that suggests if we could just fix this, then we can move the horse up? So if, again, like Michael said, like Danny said, you have to check a lot of boxes, financial boxes, where it's going. And then my mantra is I'd rather pass on 9 good ones than get 1 bad one, because those bad ones are heartbreakers, especially for new owners. As Gary said, the new HISA rules are tremendous in that regard, because horses that you would have got before, people don't know. In the old days, as soon as the gate opens, if you're claiming a horse, you own that horse. No matter what happened, even if the horse happened to pass away in the race, you own that horse. So that was the big risk in claiming. Now with the HISA rules, a lot of that is taken away. Not so in Louisiana, not so in West Virginia, because they don't participate. So there's still the risks there. But in most of the other jurisdictions, you're at least covered a little bit by that. So it's a long process, but I think if you cooperate and you have a plan, you have a chance.
So Mike, you're pretty involved as an owner in claiming horses. It looks like Danny Caldwell is pretty involved as an owner in claiming horses. And Gary, you talked about the process you follow, and Michael. So here's a question of how much should an owner rely on their trainer to identify horses to claim and to make the claims on their behalf? Gary, why don't you start with that? You're a trainer. I mean, how much do your owners rely on you to identify those horses, or are they out there doing their homework and coming to you saying, "Hey, boss, like to think about claiming this horse"?
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand. You have to have a really good relationship with your trainer. Trainer has to have a good relationship with the owner. The trainer's going to know things about a certain horse that an owner can't possibly know. Like, oh, I saw that horse. I ran against him 2 months ago, and I saw him come back a little ouchy, or that horse. And another part of this where the trainer can help the owner a lot is there is a definite, and I'm sure our panelists can concur on this, there is a definite psychological side to claiming. You want to claim, if you're claiming off a certain trainer, you have what you believe to be that psychological profile of that trainer. And when a trainer does something that doesn't fit, that you've never seen him do before, beware. You have to beware. There are guys out there that never drop a horse and then all of a sudden drop a horse. Or there's a guy that, there are certain trainers that protect their horses way too much, and suddenly they're not protecting a horse. So you have to play that little bit of a psychological game as well. And the owner and the trainer, I always say to my owners, when I do my homework and you do your homework and we both land on the same horse in a strong way, that's probably the horse we need to claim.
Yeah, I remember years back, Bobby Frankel dropped a horse in for a claim at Saratoga, and a friend of mine who actually bred the horse wanted to claim it, but he was a little worried because Frankel rarely did that, and the horse wins by 10 lengths, and there was no claim in for the horse because he was out of character for him to do that. So I see your point. Yeah.
One of the other things that, is interesting, when you use public trainers, it's difficult for a trainer like that to recommend a horse to you if he has 5, 10, pick a number of different owners. So the trainers that I have generally prefer their owners to suggest the horse. And then they will look at it, and they have some pecking order, first come, first served type of thing. So that, because 4 owners might call them up and say, I want to claim the same horse. So by having some sort of internal rule that first come, first served, then they don't have to be responsible and the other owners don't get mad at them. But so I always pick out the horses initially, but I always 100% of the time give the trainer right of final refusal. Because as Gary said, I think Michael did too, we can look at the racing form, we can analyze buyer figures, speed figures, we can look at all the different things. But unless you're standing right there you can't see a knee, you can't see an ankle, you can't see certain things that are just visible right, 8 feet away. So I always tell my trainers, if there's anything you don't like, rip the slip up. It's like Doritos. There'll be more tomorrow. So we'll come back and get them.
So good point, Mike, about public trainers having multiple owners. Michael, so if you've got a client that says, yeah, I'd like to have a few horses in the claiming ranks for some quick action, I mean, what's that process? Would you then go to the trainer and say, hey, I've got a client here that wants to claim a few horses, or will you do the homework for them? How's that work on your end?
Yeah, so it's something that we've always done. So people might not know this. Gary knows this. I used to be a trainer. So I used to train in New York. And then now I do more bloodstock agent work and buying horses for people. So when somebody comes to me and says, look, I have a certain amount of money and I want to build a stable and I want to do it through claiming, my process is very similar to Gary's, to where I will go through and I will first look at the PPs for horses that I think fit for what they're wanting for their budget. I then sit down and watch all the race replays, go back and look at the purchase prices yearling, see if I saw the horse as a yearling or a 2-year-old. We went through a 2-year-old sale. I'll watch their breeze at the 2-year-old sale. And I'm trying to check and see if there's a change in that horse's movement that might indicate that there's something wrong with them at this stage of the game. And trying to at least check off the box that hopefully the horse is sound when it's running sound. I know to me as a trainer, there was always a big difference between sound at a jog on pavement and sound at a gallop and sound at race pace. So look at race replays. And then, as Gary very much pointed out to, the psychological part of the game. Now, I used to love to play games as a trainer. When I drop horses in, everybody'd say, oh, he always takes a horse over in polos. And then the one I didn't want to get claimed, I'd take without polos and scare everybody off and then win the race and take the horse home. So understanding, as Gary said, patterns, right? Work patterns that are normal for that trainer. How often does that trainer typically breeze his horses? What does he space his races out like? What's normal for that guy? So it was interesting. We claimed a horse for a client year before last spring. And it was a horse that would run every 6 weeks and would have no breezes in between. And to me, you can get away with jogging a horse or galloping a horse for 2 to 3 weeks before they start losing fitness. And then I went through all of his horses, and all of his horses had that same pattern. They would run, and they might, if a race was in 6 weeks, they wouldn't breeze. If it was past 6 weeks, he would breeze 4 days before they'd run. So I called an owner and said, this horse has never gone 2 turns on the dirt. He's only sprinted. He's by a sire, Fort Larned, who is a route sire, Breeders' Cup Classic winner. And he doesn't breeze. So if I go over to Churchill Downs and look at this horse for you, and he just looks like this big, lanky, unfit horse, we're dropping the slip. But if he looks like a muscled out, fully fit racehorse, then we might not have as much there as we think. So then, as I said, that process, I went to the racetrack, looked at the horse. The horse is big and lanky, not fit. We dropped the slip, claimed the horse for $30,000. He went up to Saratoga and won a starter 50 wire to wire by 4.5 at 1 mile and 1/8, and then ran second in a grade 3. So I'll do the research, just as Danny mentioned, just as Gary mentioned, PPs, race replays, knowing the trainers. Gary would have a great way of speaking to that of when you train against other guys, you know those operations. You've seen them, you've been around them, you know it's normal. And then you also know the PPs of that. So that final step, and then as Gary also pointed out, the final inspection of when that horse walks over. So then to point out to your question, I'll get all that homework done, and then I will get that horse, as Mike mentioned, because of the pecking order, as soon as I'm done with my research, into that trainer to make sure I'm first in line if anybody else wants to claim that horse. Every now and again, you have to negotiate. We had a trainer last year who was claiming a lot of horses for Ken Ramsey. And so every now and again, I'd say, look, I got the last 2. Ken can have that one. But, so yes, you just try and get everything done and get it to the trainer as soon as possible, so it's easier for them. But it's a balance. It's a huge balance. And I think Mike mentioned it, Gary mentioned it, because you have to know your next step, right? So You know, I've had guys come to me with a budget, and one guy wanted to claim a horse for 30,000. I said, look, the horse is going to be worth 15 next time out. It's just not a $30,000 horse. So you have to know what you're getting, what you're claiming, what the next step is to try and hopefully always stay on the upswing of what you're doing as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay, just a specific point on maiden claimer. You know, the maiden race is every horse's best friend. That's generally the easiest race. It's a decent purse, so it's a get out race for you. So it's one of those things where when you're claiming a horse, you generally want them to win by 100 lengths or run second by a nose. You don't want to lose the condition that you're in, because that's the money making, get your money back condition. So those maiden races, you know, you have to really be sure, because it's been mentioned more than once. Typically, that's an overinflated price in the claiming ranks, so that if you are running in a maiden 20, your next start probably will be for 10. So worst case scenario, you claim a horse in a maiden 20, it wins. Now you're dropping down to some other level, you're going to lose money, right?
Okay.
So that's an issue. So you got to, the maiden, claiming a maiden is a real roll of the dice.
Okay, good point. Good point. So if one of the benefits of claiming horses is it provides owners a quick return back to the races and maybe even to the winner's circle, you know, how soon can a horse that's been claimed run back? I mean, what's typical of how long before that horse can get back in the starting gates? Gary, you're smiling, so I'm going to throw this one at you.
You know, any question you ask a trainer, if we had 10 trainers on this panel, you'd get 10 different answers to that.
Okay.
But in my heyday as a claiming trainer, my biggest adversary was Ricky Dutrow. I came into New York, he was the king of New York claiming, and I came into New York and I challenged him considerably. And he taught me something. You know, he was running horses back on a week's rest. I mean, if you have it, really, the answer to that question, how soon can a horse run back, really relates to a couple of very important things. How sound the horse is. Is he a bleeder? Because if he bled a little bit during a race, you got to give him more time. And how does he recover after his race? So when you get a horse, if that horse, you want to put him in the stall, you see him eat his feed and then rip the feed tub off the wall, that's a good start. And then the horse comes out with the hot walker the next morning and he's rearing up and carrying on and kicking up. You know, that's a horse that I wouldn't hesitate to run back on short rest. But when you're a claiming trainer, you claim a horse, when you get to the barn the next morning, you don't know what to expect. That horse comes out of the stall, he might be arthritic, he might be cranky, he might be sore, or he might be perfect. So it all goes back to what both of our esteemed owner and trainer said about knowing where you're going with that horse. I might claim a horse and say, man, there's a horse back in 7 days, race back in 7 days, if that horse fits the criteria. And then, oh yeah, there's another race for him back in 3 weeks if I need a little bit longer recovery for that horse, or 4 weeks or whatever. So yes, it really depends on the individual, and they're all different. And usually when you're a claiming trainer, the morning after tells you a big story about that horse, for positive or for negative.
Sure.
Legally, though, you can run a horse back not the next day because there's an entry, but there is nothing really legally stopping you from running horses back fast. I don't know if Gary remembers Oscar Barrera Sr., but he used to run horses on Tuesday and Thursday, right? He'd claim them right away and they'd be in 2-3 days, and those horses would win. But I think another angle edge for claiming people is a lot of times, these claiming horses, owners, trainers, the barn, they're depending on paychecks from those horses. So often claiming horses tend to run more often, of course, than a stake horse would. So when we look at claiming horses, it took me, I'm an overnight sensation, 44 years in the making, but we used to run them as fast as we could, find a spot, get your money back. We sort of found that if you take a little more time sometimes, and baby that horse just a little bit. Maybe now I'd rather run 8 to 10 times a year when the horse is at peak fitness than 14 or 15 times a year when he's 90% or 80%. Because I don't know if, I'm sure most people listening or watching know this, but racing is all about winning. Sounds like a cliche, but it refers to the breakdown of the purse. So the winner gets 60%. The second place horse who loses by a nose gets 3 times less, 20%. Then you're down to 10% for third, 5, 3, 2, and a couple $100 for the last place finishers. You need to win in order to be solvent. So maybe, yes, you could run him back and not quite right, but he gives a good performance. He finishes second. If you'd have waited for the next spot in the book, even though that might be 3 weeks and another $1,500 or $2,000 in training bills, now you win the race. And now you bring back, at a small track, you make 17,000 as opposed to 3,500, and that's massive if you're trying to pay your bills.
But I'd like to hit on some, not just all the pros, but some of the cons, some of the negatives, or some of the other areas of claiming horses. Michael Wilson, I've always heard that it costs as much to have a horse in training that's a $10,000 claimer versus a graded stakes horse. I mean, is there a lot of truth in that? Because if that's the case, horses running in the claiming ranks, they just don't have the opportunity to make the purse money, that a horse that you maybe buy at that Keeneland sale that you're at, that's going to end up in some of those higher $100,000 maiden races and allowance races and so on. So can you address that a little bit from the claiming ranks, how difficult it may be to turn a profit?
Well, a lot of it depends on your track, right? What jurisdiction you're in and what normal day rates are. So, as Gary mentioned, he's in New York. I used to be in New York. We have horses for clients that are in New York, Kentucky. We're out of California at the moment. So we're kind of on the larger circuits. We take horse down to Gulfstream. And so I always tell people budget $5,000 a month to take care of a horse, between your training, your farrier, and your vet bills, plan on about $5,000 per month. And so that's typically why. So Gary made a great comment in terms of how quickly you can run them back. And I think a lot of that depends on what your plan is with that horse. Like if it's a quick flip horse, like you claim for 20, he's going to be a 20 horse. You want to win and run him back for the 20 and get him won and claimed. Great. You run back quicker if you can. There's other situations where some of the horses I try and look for are horses that, hey, you know what, they were a little bit overtrained, or I know in that operation they do X, Y, and Z. And so let's give that horse 6 weeks. Let's bring in a chiropractor. Let's bring in an acupuncturist. Let's get this horse, jog him for 2 weeks, let his whole body reset back to normal. It becomes, as Gary said, it's next day. You have that plan, you go in, and then the next day you see the horse, that whole plan can go out the window. But the horses that I try and steer clients towards when we are claiming are horses that I do feel, and I think we've claimed 5 or 6 horses in the last year. 5 of them have all won the allowance 1X condition, which that race typically has $70,000 to $120,000 purse wherever you're at. And there's others where. So I try basically, as Gary mentioned, claiming off of Brad Cox, I try and look for spots in horses where somebody's giving up on a horse too quick and we can take it. And it was that expensive yearling, it might not have that huge purchase price at the auction, but it was that good horse that somewhere went awry in their operation to where it will make you just as much money as buying a yearling out of Keeneland in September or buying an expensive 2-year-old. And so there are a lot of horses in the claiming ranks floating around, and you see it if you give them the time and you give them the right environment that can come back and can be stakes horses and can be, as was alluded to earlier, the claiming crown. I've got 2 client horses that, one we were going to run in the claiming crown last year, one who just won this $500,000 race at Kentucky Downs. He's eligible for the 35, the claiming crown. So they're there. Those are the diamonds in the rough where you hit the home run, and it's tough to hit the home run every time. But if you focus on the right horses, knowing the returns that you can make, they're just as good of horses in the barn as a yearling from Keeneland or a 2-year-old. What I will say is claiming has been given a bad name. You know, it's, oh, you're a claiming trainer, or, oh, you're a claiming owner. You know, there's this prestige in spending too much money at a horse auction and hoping you'll get to the Kentucky Derby. I will tell you this: most claiming trainers are some of the sharpest trainers you will ever come across. They're very good at what they do, and there is nothing wrong with claiming horses. And there's no better feeling than claiming a horse that somebody else gave up on, running them in the allowance, and beating the $500,000 yearling that just broke its maiden first time. You know, so those horses are available. It's just you just have to do your homework to find them.
Okay, great points. So we've got a couple more questions. I mean, this time has gone really fast, guys. Audience, if you have any questions for the trainers, please submit them soon. We got a couple more topics I want to cover, and then we're going to go to the Q&A session. So talk about the actual nuts and bolts, the process of claiming a horse. So, for example, how soon before a race can you submit a claim? Where do you file the claim? You know, and then does the timing of making a claim vary track by track? So Gary Contessa, how does that work? Because you talked about looking at a horse at Saratoga prior to the claim. I think some racetracks, the timing is you got to drop that claim in before the horses leave the barn.
Well, I'm not familiar with that. You know, I'm an East Coast trainer, Monmouth, Parks, Laurel, but I'm a New York trainer more than anything. And they're all pretty much universal. They do things the same way. You have to put a claim slip in before 10 minutes to post. At 10 minutes to post, you get shut out. There's a box in the racing office, and you have until 10 minutes to post. So that generally gives you a time to see that horse come over towards the races. They enter the paddock at about 16 or 17 minutes to post. And then you have that 5 or 6 minutes to get to wherever that claiming box is, if you're indeed going to go forward and drop the slip.
Okay, let me just stop you there. So, Mike, where you claim horses, is that kind of the same process?
It varies. So I've raced in 28 different jurisdictions, and it's different at almost every one, but it usually is between 10, 12, 15 minutes. And when Gary says drop the slip in the box, there's always a actual timestamp clock there. You have to take the claim slip is actually an envelope, and the envelope doesn't say on the outside who you're claiming. That's a secret. That's inside the envelope. It'll have the race number on it, sometimes the date, and then you have to stick this envelope in the timestamp machine to prove that you got in under the wire. That's common at every single racetrack. Sometimes the claim box is minutes away from the paddock. So generally when that happens, you'll have a groom or you'll have somebody there. So you're there on your cell phone, you watch the horse, you call the groom, he stamps it, drops it in the box. So it can be different, but it is within that 15 to 10 minute time frame everywhere. And then, as mentioned earlier, you have to have money in your account. You have to fill out every single thing. And this is sometimes it's an old process. And I guess I understand it, but it doesn't really go to intent. So if you say, I want to claim ABC horse in the 5th race on June 2nd, and you fill that out, and you happen to write June 3rd, your claim is voided. If you spell your own name wrong or your trainer's name wrong, it's clear who you are and who your trainer is. But if you misspell that, voided.
So that was my next question, was going to be to Mike and Gary. If you make any mistake on the claim slip, do they just pass it through, or does it void the claim?
I have a terrible story from last year, which I'll throw. Sorry, Gary, to jump in.
That's all right.
So I had a filly I found for a client at Churchill Downs last year who I thought was very talented, and she was Pennsylvania bred. And I said, look, this is a Pennsylvania bred stakes filly. We need to claim her. She was in for 40. So we go to Churchill. I dropped the slip. Sorry, my apologies. She was in for 50. So go to Churchill, drop the slip. Now in Kentucky is one of the few jurisdictions that makes you write in the racetrack's name. Now, New York, you don't have to worry about what track you're at. Kentucky, it's a Kentucky uniform slip. You got to write Turfway, Keeneland, Churchill. So I wrote, did the slip, checked the slip looked good, dropped the slip. I'm the only slip in on this filly. The filly gets run second, beaten half a length, looked very good. I get a call from the racing office. We voided your slip. I said, what'd you void the slip over? They said, you forgot the S on Churchill Downs. I said, wait a second. So Churchill Down doesn't pass. No. Churchill Downs doesn't pass. We voided it for Churchill Downs. Anyways, filly goes up to Saratoga. Filly runs in the 2X, runs third, drops back in for 40. Now it's a 16-way shake. We lose her for 40. She goes up to Saratoga. Brad Cox drops her in for 32. She won by 7. Then Robert Falcone claimed her and won the $100,000 Pennsylvania bred stakes race right off the claim, all over a missed S on Churchill Downs. So it is tricky. It can be difficult with voided claims and can be, anyways, just make sure you spell correctly.
That's a great illustration of one small mistake could cost you the claim. Yeah, that's great. So, well, that's great. You know, I'd like to wrap up the questions now from me to the panelists and go to the Q&A from our audience. But first, let's go ahead and hear from our Q&A sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds, and I'll sort through those questions and we'll go through those questions from the audience.
How do you become the gold standard in racing partnerships? One horse, one partner, one victory at a time. Congratulations to all our partners who have made West Point the gold standard for the last 3 decades.
Okay, so first question, I'll just throw this out to whoever wants to take it. Can you talk about how do you insure a horse prior to making a claim? So I think somebody said when the starting gate opens, that's when you take ownership of the horse. How do you make sure that horse is insured from that point on? Who'd like to take that?
I could tell you in Ohio that and I used to be in New York too, at least at Finger Lakes. I'm not sure downstate, but you can have, if you're a member of the HPPA, you can have what's called claiming insurance. And that is where you pay a small fee, actually. The HPPA helps underwrite that. And if something were to happen to the horse in the race, and this is up to $10,000, you would get half of the money back. I don't know of another, now that's gone because of HISA. That horse that got injured in the race, you would never have the claim. So it's voided. But to my experience, I don't know how you could insure a horse that you don't own. So that would be something that maybe Gary or Michael knows how to do. But until it's actually yours, I don't think it's possible. But maybe these guys know a way.
Well, I do have that answer from a New York perspective. All of the insurance companies, most of the insurance companies that we use or my clients use are located in Kentucky. But you absolutely, now it's with HISA now, it's not as necessary as it used to be. There was a time where it was extremely necessary, but you can call your insurance company and say, I'm claiming a horse in the 6th race today and I want to be covered, and you are covered. If it's people that you deal with, it's standard industry practice. But now with the way things have come, if a horse comes back bad or a horse has a catastrophic injury, anything like that, it's an automatic void. So the need for claim box insurance is a lot less now than it ever used to be. It's almost non-existent now.
But Gary, to that point, you know, the horse runs and seems to be okay at the barn. The claim goes through. A day or two later, something health-wise happens or something pops up. I mean, how long is that voiding the claim in effect?
Well, again, in New York, the voiding of the claim is in effect until you take possession. So when a horse is claimed in New York, it goes to a test barn and it cools out for 30, 40 minutes gets his blood test, gets a urine test. Now you're ready to take over you come in with your own halter, your own people, and you're ready to take that horse. Before that happens, the state veterinarian who resides in that barn is going to take him out on the road, jog him up and down, and declare him sound and he's your horse, or declare him unsound and void the claim. And what happens? So if something pops up 2 days later, you're dead. You have that horse. It doesn't cover you forever, because we all know that horse that you claim that's sound can be walking back and just hook his foot in a little hole in the road, and now you have a sore horse that had nothing to do with that race. It doesn't take much for a 1,200-pound horse to get sore on you. And I'll just share a quick story with you about a horse I claimed at Saratoga this year. Loved the horse. He finished second, got beat ahead. People will see who I'm talking about when I run him back. The next morning, he was 3-legged lame. I couldn't get him out of the stall, but it was a foot bruise. We dealt with it 5 or 6 days later. He was perfect. He's perfect now. Everything's fine. But that next morning, I had no coverage. I couldn't go back and say, hey, this horse is lame tomorrow morning. No. Once I took possession of him, all bets were off. He's my horse.
Okay. So here's a question from the audience. How does a racetrack know that you have the satisfactory amount in your horseman's account to make the claim? And what kind of account do you have to make the claim? So Mike, why don't you claim a lot of horses? I mean,
so at every track, you have to be licensed, of course, in the state in order to claim. And then every horseman has their own account at the racetrack itself. So you put money in that account, and various tracks take money different ways. Some will accept a wire, some will accept cash, cashier's check, personal check, depends on the track. So then when your claim slip is in the box, the stewards open up the slips. They check with the bookkeeper. Does Mike Anacino have $5,000 in his account to cover that? And in many states, there's taxes on top of that. So you have to also have the, claiming tax. If you have the correct amount, of course, in your account, then you're able to claim. Okay. So it's a racetrack account, not an outside bank account. You can't link it to a credit card. It's got to be resident at the track, because the instant you take the horse, they transfer that money to the previous owner. So that's done right away.
Okay, good. There's a question about claiming fillies. Do you ever claim fillies as potential brood mares? Michael Wilson?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I've actually built a broodmare band via the claim box. You'll be amazed. And actually, I know another client who's been extremely successful, and now is a commercial breeder, and he built most of his broodmare band through the claim box. So sometimes, Gary would not be one of these. I was not one of these, but there are a lot of trainers who don't look at the pedigree of what they have that's in their barn. Last year I found a filly that was a half to grade 1 winner in for a $35,000 tag. I try and buy that filly in the sales ring. She's $150,000. So drop on her claimer, breeder. Instantly you have a horse that's more valuable than what you paid for it. So we claimed a filly for a client last year, a Nyquist filly that was out of a grade 1 placed mare. She won that day for 50. She was lame the next morning, gave her a little time off, and she just won an allowance race. So she's the perfect type of, the allowance win covers the time off, but now it's also boosted her earnings, and being out of a grade 1 placed mare, she's a perfect breeding prospect. So last year, what we were actually seeing at the sales grounds, which was very interesting, was there's a big demand in the market for maiden mares versus mares in foal. So people were claiming fillies at a Keeneland with pedigree and then entering them in the January sale. And then just, the horse would be on a farm for a month to get past that 30-day window of you can't do transfer of ownership within 30 days of a horse that you claim. And then those horses would walk in the ring, and a $30,000 claimed horse would sell for $80,000, just because there was a demand in the market and there was a shortage in the market for maiden mares. So yes, you can definitely build a broodmare band via the claiming ranks. There's a lot of good mares out there. And the one thing I think Gary and Mike could attest is what makes a great racehorse is mental toughness. And so you'll find some of these fillies in the claiming ranks who've run 30, 40 times and made, 300,000 the hard way. A lot of those mares become very good producers when bred to the right stallions. So it is a great avenue. I do use that to build broodmare pens for people if they don't want to buy a public auction.
Well, and last month we talked about buying in public auction, and some of the speakers talked about buying fillies because they have residual value. It seems to me that claiming fillies that have a good pedigree and some confirmation also gives the owner some residual value if they want to sell it later at one of the public auctions. So good point. So here's a question from the audience. What are some of the typical health issues you can improve upon from a claimed horse? Is it all about nutrition?
I can tell you my so groceries. So a lot of horses, they just need either to be fed more or a change in their feed program. Feet, because as Gary said, you got 1,200 pounds pounding down on essentially a fingernail. So, shoeing is not an automatic thing. It's not like every blacksmith has the same ideas. They're all very different. The angle of the shoe, the length of the toe, those kinds of things make a big difference. So if you're paying attention to the feet, and not every trainer treats feet the same way. So if sometimes they don't pick their feet. I mean, it sounds sort of crazy, but if you could just take better care of the feet, that's a big thing. And then it's the overall health, and especially with a gelding. There's one part that is often neglected and not cleaned up. If you clean that up a little bit better, you get a big sigh of relief out of the gelding, and all of a sudden he becomes a different horse. So you look at those, they sort of seem like obvious. Oh, and teeth. Teeth is the other thing, because the horse dentists are becoming fewer and farther, to find. So lots of times a horse has an issue with his teeth, which may be why he's not eating, or why he's fighting the bit in the race, or throwing his head, lots of different things. All comes back to the teeth. So if you go in there and look at the teeth and spend $75 for a horse dentist, you may move a horse up from a $5,000 claimer to an allowance horse with a file and a good dentist hand. So those are the immediate things.
Great point. So here's a question targeted to Gary. So there's obviously a lot of relationships on the backside. How do you manage the conversation with an owner that is adamant about claiming a horse, XYZ horse, off a trainer or connections that you would prefer not to do that? How do you handle that?
The owner, now, I think I'm reading you right. An owner wants a horse that I don't want.
The owner wants you to claim a horse off connections that you would prefer not to make that claim from.
Well,
because of your relationship.
Philosophy. I have a lot of friends in this business, and I tell them all the same thing. We're all in this together, and I'm trying to make a living just like you are and put food on the table. So there is, other than my wife and people that I train for, there's nobody I wouldn't claim a horse off of. So if I have an owner that wants a horse, and for one particular reason or another, I really don't want the horse, I am going to lay it all out there, but it's his money. And if, short of that horse having a known bad tendon or a broken leg or something, if that owner is adamant about it, my job is to make sure he has a full understanding of why I don't want to claim the horse. And I'm not going to refuse to claim a horse just because it's a nice guy that has the horse or he's a friend of mine, because my friends know that, hey, listen, I'm not mad if you claim one off of me. Don't be mad if I claim one off of you. So I'm just going to put it all out there. I'm going to tell the owner, and ultimately he can do what he wants. It's his money, and I'll give it my best shot. If and he might end up being right. I'm not going to say, he might be right on that particular horse, and I'm going to take him. If that owner wants it, I'm going to make sure he understands why I don't want it. But ultimately, I'm going to take the horse for him.
Okay. So here's the last. Good, Michael.
It's an interesting question. And I think, Gary's at a very different point in his career than maybe somebody who might have posed that question, because I ran into it early. So when you're young and you're a young trainer, you're constantly worried about burning bridges. And when you're claiming off other guys who are just getting going, right? So when you're a young trainer, sometimes you can't put a horse in a claiming race because you can't afford to lose it because you don't have another one to fill the stall. It's difficult, right? So I did early on. I claimed a horse off of a friend of mine who had just started training. We'd both started training at the same time, and it spoiled the relationship for about 6 months till he finally got over it. And it's different though. So if you ask me the question again, would I do it again? Yes, I would. But you have to be comfortable. If you put a horse in a claiming race, the horse is for sale. If the person's going to get upset that you're going to take it off of them, it comes with the territory of being in a claiming race. But I do understand the point of when you're young and you're starting out, or you're a trainer that has a handful of horses, how that affects their livelihood and living, and how that can really upset a relationship. But if you're a good enough person and you're honest with them, I mean, that morning I called the trainer and said, look, man, owner wants me to claim this horse. I tried to talk him off of it. He won't. I'm giving you the heads up. If you want to scratch, but I have to drop a slip on your horse. I did that with a guy and didn't go as he would have liked it, but it worked out for my client and myself. So, unfortunately our business is, we're all friends, but we all compete against each other too. So sometimes if it's a claiming race, everybody's in there for a price and everybody's for sale.
Okay, so this.
Yeah, I would have just a little
Mike.
area that, yeah, it's a little bit different maybe on the smaller circuits, especially closed circuits where the horses are almost always running at the same tracks. They're not coming in from other places. So there's a lot of dependent relationships that an owner might not be aware of. There's the one common rule that I think it applies in New York, but it used to apply at Finger Lakes where I ran before. I don't know so much about Belmont, but oftentimes trainers share the same barns. So there might be the barns at Thistledown, Mahoning, Belterra, let's say the 3 Ohio tracks, where you have 80, 100 stalls in one barn. Every trainer has 35 horses. So what that means is when horses are cooling out every day or in the wash racks, somebody else's horse is literally walking by you every day. So there's a sort of unwritten rule that it's not quite fair to claim those horses from the people that are in your barn, because you're getting an extra look at them that no one else would. And you have to trust each other, because maybe his groom is holding your horse while somebody washes it off, or you're waiting in line and you're seeing that. It's sort of dirty pool to take from people like that. And then, like I said, at the smaller outfits, there are relationships and there are things that an owner might not be aware of, where this guy's hauling my horses for me all the time, or that guy is. There are just some bridges you don't cross. And then, this is a very tough game and there's a lot of things going on. And, I've been in it a long time and I'm a business guy, but there is such a thing as karma. So when you see some of the, guys got 3 horses, one good, and you're going to go claim that horse. Okay. I mean, is there anything that says no, not to claim it? But boy, oh boy, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it if it was if I needed it to put food on the table, I'd go find another job, because that's just like, it just doesn't feel right. So
okay. Great insights on all these topics. So one last question, okay, and then we're going to wrap up. So have you ever lost a horse that you didn't expect to lose in a claiming race? And let's just go around the table. Gary, you ever lose a horse you didn't think you were going to lose?
Absolutely. You if it's a good claim, you tip your hat to that guy and you move on. But that's happened many times, hundreds of times. Horses, and I go back and look and I'm like, you tell the owner, don't worry, we're not going to lose this horse. You look at the PPs. There's no way this horse is going to get claimed. Boom, he's claimed. Yes, it's happened. Sometimes it makes for a very uncomfortable situation for you, and sometimes it works out to your advantage, But yes, many times that's happened in my career. Michael Wilson, ever happened to you?
Yeah, it happened once. Typically, I placed them where I placed them to, if they were claimed, I knew they were going to be claimed. But I did claim a horse once for 40,000, and he ran 5th. And then I raised him to 62.5, and the horse was claimed. by another trainer. I'd never expected it. The horse ran dead last, but he was claimed for 62.5, and that was what it was. The owner made 22,500 in a month without the horse doing anything. So it worked out. But yeah,
Okay.
I was very surprised.
All right. And Mike Anticino, ever happened to you lose one you didn't think you would?
I've lost quite a few that I didn't think I would, and it's interesting because I think it's because people sometimes try to get in your head. So the two stories that I would tell is one time I couldn't get the horse. I mean, I'm in a different level than Michael Wilson and Gary. You know, we run in a lot lower claiming tags, but I was trying to get this horse in for 4,000, and that was the kind of owner I was at the time. My horses were 4,000, 5,000. Horse couldn't get in. He desperately needed to run. I entered him for 10. And I know the guy who took the horse after, and I heard him talking to the owner saying, this guy would never run this horse for that kind of money unless he thought it was worth it. Well, that was not the reason I was in there. They dropped a slip and I was very grateful. And another time I was nowhere near the track. I was living in Texas. The horse was running in Ohio, and we put him in for 7,500, and he ran, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. My trainer said he might have been the slowest horse he's ever trained in his 30 plus years of running. And then he sends me a 1-word text, claimed. I said, claimed? I called him right away. Claimed? He said, yeah, somebody took him. I said, if I'd have put $7,000 in the saddlebag, I would have been happy if I just got 500 more. But no, they took the horse, and actually, you know, the horse is still running, and he's actually won some races, and he was very sound, because that's one of the things in horse racing. Generally, the slow horses, they're sound. They don't run hard enough to get hurt. So he's running 5 years later. And I think they like him. So good for them. But yeah, sometimes it happens like that.
Okay.
And also I've lost some horses that I absolutely didn't want to lose, that I was shocked. You know, they were claimed because I ran the horse 4 times for the same price. Why are you claiming him today? But you know, they did. So, but like Michael said, a lot of people get mad when they lose their horses. You know, claiming means for sale. And I do wish more people would sort of understand that it is, you know, put them in there. But if you lose them, you know, you can't really be upset that somebody decided to drop. So.
Okay. Well, great insights. You know, we've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes, and we probably could talk for another hour and 20 minutes, but I think we need to wrap up now with the Q&A and everything. So I'd really like to thank all the panelists for your time, your insights. And this is a very important topic to cover because so many horses race in the claiming ranks. So thanks to Gary, thanks to Mike, Michael, Andy, really appreciate the time you took today. I know a couple of you guys are at the sales, anxious to get back there. So also like to thank our panel sponsors, the National HBPA, Forza Bloodstock, High Point Farm Training Center, and our audience for being here. But mostly thank you to all the owners, because the owners, you invest in our sport, and without owners, we just simply don't have an industry. So we're going to be back in October with another online webinar. We're going to have a couple veterinarians on board talking about some of the health and veterinary issues on your horses. Until then, we hope that you do win a lot of races and visit the Winner's Circle often. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
My
we'll
pleasure.
talk again. Thank you.